Slow down. Lay your burden down.
Hey, welcome to Divergent Paths with Dan Dunford. I am Dan Dunford, and this is my show. I hope you like it. If you haven't, if this is your first time listening, I hope you keep listening. And if this is one of many times you've been listening, thank you, and, let me know what you think. Well, if this is your first time, too, let me know what you think. Anyway, this week's guest is the wonderful composer Stephanie Ann Boyd. It's a kind of funny story. So, I had never met Stephanie, and I want to say back in October, I was working on putting together an interview with the Washington Square Winds, which is woodwind quintet here in the city. They're great, and had a really good time with them. Well, the day I was set to tape their interview, I was riding up the elevator with Phil Rashkin, who's the oboist in the Washington Square Winds, and with him was a woman who I'd never seen before, and I think I complimented her shoes or something like that, and we just started talking, and Phil said, hey, this is one of the composers who's writing us a piece for this upcoming concert that we have, and, you guys should talk. So I ended up doing a short 10-minute segment with her that went on the Washington Square Winds episode, and it was immediate, it was evident right away that I wanted to talk to her again on her own episode. She had a lot of interesting things to say just in the 10 minutes, and I wanted to do at least another 60. So after a few months, we were able to set up another time and spend more time talking about her music and less connected to something, on a larger scale. Let's just say that. And we had a really great time. So this is her solo interview. And we I've been told that I sometimes sound like I'm stoned when I'm talking on these things. I don't know what that's all about, but I definitely, there's a point in this interview where I got really excited, and it isn't about music like you might think, considering I host a podcast where I talk to musicians. It was when I was talking about the X-Files, which might be a little embarrassing, but anyway, it makes sense in context, mostly. But anyway, the interview with Stephanie was just fantastic. I was really happy with it, and she has a lot of really cool stuff coming up, which we cover, and we'll go in the write-up and stuff for this episode. As per usual, there is music from Stephanie featured on the end of the episode. It's the first movement of her violin concerto, and it's stupendous. So that will be at the end. It's being performed by some of Stephanie's colleagues and friends from her time at England Conservatory, and with this soloist Eunae Koh. And it's, like I said, it's fantastic. So stick around and listen to that, and enjoy the rest of the interview. It was a real fun one. And if you enjoy the podcast, subscribe and share it and listen. And it's on iTunes, it's on Stitcher, it's on my website. Just, write a review. Tell me what you think. The email is divergentpathspod@gmail.com. So shoot me an email if you have any comments that I really need to hear, or even if you don't. If I don't need to hear them, still send them to me. I will read them and be happy about it. So anyway, enjoy the episode. Stephanie, welcome back to the podcast.
Oh my goodness, thank you for having me back.
After 4 months.
4 months? Was it that long ago?
October. Yeah, October.
It's gone really quickly.
What's different about you? Your hair color is different?
Hair color, I think the hair color, no, hair color is the same. No, actually, yeah, I did dye it once in between our seeing each other. What else is different? More music has been written, more people have been talked to, and I've drank a lot of tea in between. I had
traveling the world.
I haven't been traveling so much. I'm starting to get used to the rhythm of the seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the first half of the season is a lot more of the collaborating process, and then spring is just like premieres all over the place, and it's not. So I'll be traveling a lot more in the next few months.
Yeah, that was kind of why I was, because you're going to be, you told me your schedule is going to get increasingly crazy as the months pass. And,
yeah.
And I was looking at my schedule and I was realizing, this week is pretty much the only time to do it before everything just goes insane.
Yeah.
So here we are. So last time we only did 10 minutes, which doesn't really allow too much time. And that was pretty much focused in on one specific piece,
right,
and one specific collaboration. Although we did talk about a number of things in that 10 minutes. So revisiting the basics.
Uh-huh.
You're a composer.
I am a composer.
You're a violinist.
I was for a very long time. I call myself an ex-violinist. Yeah, I played all the way through undergrad.
You're a tea aficionado, and
no, I try. Well, I can fake it.
At some point, it's just with anything. It's with tea, with coffee, with beer, with whiskey. Like any of those things, like you can appreciate the good stuff. But there's always going to be people who are like, "Oh, you don't know anything."
Yeah, I suppose
it's really annoying. Same thing with music, actually, too.
Of course, uh-huh. And I think that what I've really enjoyed is, when you get to know a lot of very, very opinionated people, and these are the people who you're spending most of your time with, just being able to observe and just absorb everybody's opinion without reacting to it. I think that's actually how I glean the most from those interactions.
So I don't think we'll go back and cover, too much. I mean, we can revisit some things if they come up, but we covered kind of your background. So if you're listening to this and you want to know like where she went to school and why she quit violin or whatever, you can go back to the Washington Square Winds episode and listen to the last 15 minutes. But when you're right now you're working on a number of different things. Yeah. Some pretty large projects. Some very
large projects. Yeah, it's really wonderful to be sort of out of academia and being able to work at full capacity with 100% of my focus on these projects.
Academia is interesting because it creates a safe space.
Definitely.
It can, well, let me rephrase that. It can create a safe space for musicians who want to explore things and experiment with their musical voice. But at the same time, it can also be very constricting because, you're learning from people who a lot of times, and I would imagine it's a little bit different for composition professors, but particularly in the instrumental field, you're dealing a lot of times with teachers who are trying to make you sound like them, and that can be constricting. And like if you try to experiment, you can get a lot of pushback, or in another situation, like you could be prevented from going out and working and expanding what you do because, like Juilliard, they don't let them out for anything. There's no way you can skip something to do. It doesn't matter how good the job is. I mean, unless you just drop out.
Right. No, and I've had a lot of friends in similar situations where the efforts to go ahead and begin to curate a career so that you can have one foot out the door by the time that you're booted out at graduation. It's an important thing. And I mean, for me, I think that I was very proactive about it, and I knew that in grad school I needed to use that environment as a sort of a model for what I wanted my life to be outside of grad school. And so, programming pieces on every single student composition concert so that I got as much practice putting together and organizing that stuff as possible. And I mean, that process hurts. I have all these friends who are getting married right now, and and complaining. I'm sure that this might be a relatable note, but and you get these Facebook statuses, complaining about all these processes of organizing things, and it's like, no, until you've organized, 2 rehearsals and a concert with an orchestra, of 37 people, do that, and then I will have some sympathy for you.
It costs less money to organize those things, though. What you're talking about,
right?
So, but on the flip side, it's like, well, you're choosing to pay all this money.
Well, no, and I mean, it's the just in terms of coordinating things.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And so when you talk about a conservatory being a safe space, if you choose to utilize it in a certain way, and if other things, of course, align. Definitely using it as a place to make yourself go through these experiences that can, they make you grow, and growing pains are often painful.
Well, that's interesting.
But still very, very integral to being able to do that after school.
Let's talk about that a little bit, because a lot of times, what I've realized more and more over the last, I've been in New York for about 6 years ish. And things that I notice more and more is people going back to school, not to be in a place where they can experiment, but just basically to play an orchestra, take lessons, and avoid starting the payments on their student loans.
Yeah.
Not as a way to prepare themselves for the kind of cold world that lies out there. Mm-hmm. So when you say that you went into your master's degree, like thinking about how, like, getting ready, using that time to train yourself,
right,
for when, isn't that what school is supposed to be? Training yourself in a way that allows you to integrate into the career path you've chosen as seamlessly as possible.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think, to go down this path, I think it's very important to begin with the end in mind. And so with any project or friendship you enter in, or, piece you start writing, knowing what your end goal is very important for getting to that end goal. And I think that, and maybe this is something that I have practiced with a lot, because, in writing music, I do need to imagine what I eventually want to come out, right, of my head. But being able to dream about something and have a very clear vision of it helps us go ahead and manifest that thing. And so actually having a plan for succeeding, after this period of time spent in academia, I think it's very important. And
for the, if you're an instrumentalist, there are ways, you have to hustle your ass off, but there's a freelance community that if you work hard enough, you can get into. But the path for the freshly capped and gowned composer, it's a little more nebulous. There's not really that, there's grants and there's this and that, right, but there's not that tradition, that path that has been set down by, like, there has been for orchestral musicians or,
right, the narrative,
opera singers.
The narrative is a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
And so in school, you're focus, at least through my understanding of, the schools that I have ties to and sort of the processes that I've understood with higher education, but you spend all of your time working on the technical aspect of being a composer, when in fact being a successful composer after all of that, has a whole lot more to do with, or also involves, organizing projects, doing outreach, being able to communicate with the people that you're trying to work with. And all of that is goes under the umbrella of dreaming big and,
following through.
Yeah, exactly. Constructing a plan to get there and following through. And these are things that are often difficult to learn, and often things that aren't taught in school or I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, some schools have been developing entrepreneurship programs, but
That's true.
The path nowadays, the path is just different for everyone.
Right, exactly, and the sort of entrepreneurial skills that one needs as a composer may be completely different than the set of highly specific skills you would need as a freelance musician.
Yeah.
Let alone a bass trombone as compared to a violinist.
Well, what I do is I play bass trombone, but I also play tenor trombone, and I also play jazz, and I also play hip hop, and I also play euphonium. That's how I do it.
Exactly.
But it's funny, even like some of the great composers of the 20s, if I'm not mistaken, Morton Feldman, who I love his music. I'm very into that. He worked in a dry cleaner, establishment in the 50s while he was, coming up with a lot of his early stuff. So you can be on that trajectory for lasting glory or whatever, but still have to deal with a lot of shit early in your career.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's never been a better time to be a composer, because instead of just working within, say, like the New York City community, I am able to access the entire U.S. community. Anybody with an email or website. Yeah, you can become in contact with people and make something meaningful out of it, regardless of where you are, which I think is super powerful. And a global economy is not just for business people. I mean, I think it's for us too to be able to be making these connections.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting thing. Like when I was in high school, there's a lot of people at least in the trombone community and in the brass playing community as a whole that I never thought I would be able to access, even if I was a successful musician.
Right.
But in the last year, I've realized that
we're all human.
Yes. And I've interacted with a lot of these guys a number of these guys that I idolized as a 13-year-old, and it's insane. And I realized just recently that pretty much it's a little different on the West Coast, but like anyone from Chicago East, I probably have friends in common with them and could if I really needed to, I could get a hold of them,
right?
Which is crazy.
It's amazing,
but also incredible.
Right? And I think that's one of these exciting things about living in the time that we're in. I mean, with social media,
which is awful, but
there are awful parts of it. But there's also like, oh wow, I can actually tweet at somebody and have some, even if it's a one-way communication, it's still something that's being received on the other end, and also just to be able to follow along with the daily, very human experiences of your idols. I think that's an incredible step in sort of bringing humanity closer together. And yeah, I know that like lofty thoughts,
that's a heavy point.
Heavy points, but still very important, and I think it's very true.
Yeah, for sure. So one thing that you mentioned last time we talked at length was this 50 State Violin Sonata Project.
Yeah, 50 State Sonata Project.
For violin, right?
It's a sonata for violin and piano.
Okay, great. Yeah. I'm assuming, since you haven't stopped me yet, that this has continued swimmingly.
Yeah, it's really big and really exciting.
So what all does that actually entail?
So let me take it back a notch. So,
okay.
So in high school, I was able to study violin with the guy who brought the Suzuki method to America a long time ago. And I he was one of those. I mean, he was basically like Yoda. I mean, John Kendall, for anybody who didn't know this. Because everything he said, you wanted to write down and hang up on the wall. I mean, this guy had, wisdom coming out of his ears. And I would spend as much time with him as I could, even outside of lessons, just to be around him. And one of the projects that we worked on, I mean, I would help him do projects. And one of these was that he had a map of the U.S. and a map of the world. And one day he started rattling off the top of his head every single name of every person he had ever taught. And this is at the end of his life. He was in his 90s. And so 70 years worth of students. And I was pushing these pushpins into the map, not as fast as he was rattling off the names. I still remember like my fingertips, sort of hurting. But, and that was the coolest thing to think about, the positive influence. I knew everything that I was getting from him in my lessons, and that was like overwhelming and beautiful. And to think that he had done that for so many other people was pretty intense for a 17-year-old person who was, at that time probably disappointed in everything besides my music lessons. And so by the end of grad school, and this was, he passed away a few years ago, but by the end of graduate school, I had a few violinist friends who were asking me, well, can you write me a sonata? When's the sonata going to happen? And I realized, you know what? We could probably make this a lot bigger and impact a lot more lives in a really great way. And so, it sounds nuts, but I went ahead and did it. And so in the year 2000, so this year, 2016, Amerigo for violin and piano will be performed by one violinist in each state. Mm-hmm. And so they're all co-commissioners, and I've been working with everybody via Skype or FaceTime. Skype actually just did an interview with me sort of about that, which was cool.
We'll come back to that.
Yeah. And it's been so amazing how you can go from complete stranger to making music and art together in such a small amount of time. And I think that's one of the sort of the craziest takeaways that I've gotten from that. And after a while, you start realizing that, it started feeling like hosting this violinist family reunion through time, because everybody had connections to each other in some different way. And most everybody, if we trace back our, teacher lineage, we get back to Galamian and whoever else. And so that was really cool. And yes, the music world is very small, mm-hmm. but in doing this and like literally reaching out to every single state, that really made the world even that much more small, which I guess is sort of more along the tying people together in a...
So, who all is doing? Is this like professors or orchestra members or solo artists or all of the above?
Good question. So when I started out, I definitely wanted to be reaching diverse audiences. And I knew that a really good way to do that would be to actively involve people on a varied spectrum of their career. So the youngest person involved in Iowa is Bo Henson, and he is actually he's my second cousin, and he's an amazing violinist. And I'm really, I've been jealous of him, watching him grow up, and seeing him at family reunions and totally, shredding some of the most amazing music, and knowing that I could never be as good as he is. So that's been enjoyable. And
how old is he?
I think he's 15.
Okay.
Yeah. And, but so we have, Stephanie Sant'Ambrogio, who's, former concert mistress of the San Antonio Symphony, professors at many universities, including Brown University, students from Juilliard, Yale, Curtis, Rice, Oberlin, and lots of many concert masters of state orchestras, and freelancers as well, and the whole gamut. And again, talking to all these people, and with all of our energies being focused on this one piece, seeing all of being able to interact with all of these completely different artistic minds and how they approach the music and what things they're noticing in it. I feel radically like too lucky. I mean, it's been too, it's almost been too enjoyable. I mean, it's been a lot of emails, but
well, like
and a lot of time.
It's like concerning. It's like, oh well, is this going to be the pinnacle of?
Yeah, no, this is just the beginning, and next year.
Well, at least that's how I think about things. If I do something
it's not very
big,
optimistic.
it's not.
It's pretty self-defeating.
Oh yeah.
Like self-fulfilling prophecy.
Is this going to be the best thing I ever do? Is this thing?
Mm-hmm.
Is it not going to get better from here? Good for you for not being like that.
Yeah. So and next year, I'll be working with 50 violins from around the world for a second sonata. And you can see my world map. I went ahead and did that. It took me a while to find map of the US and a map of the world. I think the map of the world is a little outdated.
Well, and also like it's completely inaccurate as far as actual geographical signs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like because there's a BuzzFeed video actually showing.
Oh, really?
Like the comparison of how things are portrayed on the world map versus how what the real comparison is. Like if you look at a world map, because the way they flatten it out, Greenland looks bigger than like Canada, but it's actually like smaller than Australia. It's this crazy thing. Anyway,
I'm missing my BuzzFeed content, apparently.
Every time I click on a video and it turns out to be a BuzzFeed video, I hate myself a little bit because it's just so much of what they put out is just stupid filler. Anyway, none of that needed to really be said. But
PSA, everybody. PSA, don't click on those BuzzFeed videos.
Well, the thing is, I know people who work for, or I'm familiar and fans of people who have worked for them or have worked for them in the past. And I'm like, oh, God, you're part of it.
Well, creating viral media, I mean, there is something to be admired there.
Absolutely. They're more good. They're better at their jobs than I probably will ever be. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. Yeah. So working with 50 different violinists, and you're going to be doing it again. How do you like that? That's a massive undertaking. Like how do you kind of condense 50 people's opinions or contributions into one thing? I mean, everyone's a co-commissioner, but like you can only take so much from each person or input from each person. Of course, you have to maintain your own artistic voice across all of it. Like how does that work?
And that's interesting. And that's one thing where how I thought that the project would work at the very beginning has changed now that I have a little bit more perspective. And so.
And of course, things are never exactly like you think they're going to be.
True, but I mean, in sort of constructing a model of how I think things will work, that helps me sort of, set it up so that it has the highest potential for success, right? So, and I guess this was actually a sort of a positive realization that that after I handed out the draft, and right now I'm in the process of workshopping the piece. But initially, I had assumed that there were going to be a lot of musical changes to the piece, and that that there would be those types of edits that I would need to make. But what ended up happening was the music was sort of, I don't know, like concrete enough that, and things made sense. And so none of those changes were actually ever brought up, and I didn't feel the need to make those changes. And I feel like maybe that's one thing about being sort of at a certain point in terms of your growth as a composer, where you're able to really, present this music that is far along in the process of it being born, that everybody can focus in their attentions to these, like these higher and much finer details. Mm-hmm. And so working to make the music just slightly more idiomatic for the instrument, and to do these sort of smaller timbral changes, and to think more about bowings and how to like more adequately convey, in terms of like instructions for certain little bits of music. Being able to focus on that has been really great, and I think that that's actually helping us create a better piece that will be better received and more easily received by anybody who chooses to program it in the future. Yeah. So that was one of those feel good moments. I mean, even though I was like, oh darn it, this isn't what I expected. No, it's a good. So as in for next year, I think that that I'll understand that a lot of the main sort of workshopping will happen immediately prior to everybody's performances, where I'm working with somebody and giving feedback based on their own musical choices about the piece, as opposed to, oh, measure 5 really just doesn't work well, in context with anything else. Mm-hmm. It's a completely different level of editing. Yeah.
So, how is it, as far as like a premiere goes, how is that being rolled out? Is it all on the same day, or is it like that's
like one of these, like Eric Whitaker?
There's no way that that's possible.
No, and so
unless you're Eric Whitaker.
Yeah, Eric. No, and I'd initially thought about doing something like that, but no, the how it's worked is that commissioners are programming it on often pre-existing, faculty or student recitals or chamber music series or festivals they have ties to. Mm-hmm. Actually, several people have gone ahead and programmed it on an extra recital or an extra concert that they use as a great excuse to program all new music. So actually, there are a lot of performances by other composers that are happening now because of this project, which I think is kind of a cool way.
So I'm assuming all 50 performances are going to be recorded.
Yes.
Are you gonna?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure what I'm gonna.
Because I'm like, are you gonna create some sort of like virtual choir-esque thing, to go along with it?
Right, and that would be cool.
But it's a little more like
that's a little gimmicky.
Solo, it's a little gimmicky, but also with God, Eric Whitaker again, but like with his virtual choir project,
and his hair. Yeah.
He posted his social media feed is great, but he posted a note that a review a 9-year-old kid had written in pencil of his choral work Sleep, and it was just this 9-year-old saying, "This piece was so boring, I hated it," and it was so awesome. He was like, God. "I'm definitely putting this on my wall." Anyway, but in for people who are listening who don't know, virtual choir is Eric Whitaker takes one of his many choral works and invites millions of people to send in videos of them singing one of the parts, and then they go through it and they create one massive collage of everyone singing his piece, and it goes online and it gets millions of views, blah, 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 blah. And so like in a situation like this where you have 50 violinists from across the country performing the same piece, that's like the first thing that pops to my mind. Have you thought about how you were going to handle that, or what you're going to do with it afterwards?
Right, and I've not sat down yet to go ahead and brainstorm that, post-lude sort of a part of the project, and of course getting permission from everybody to use their recordings is, I know, something that may be
tricky.
Yeah, tricky, and I really, it means a lot to me to be very respectful of what people want to happen, to their recordings. And so, some ideas that I've had were, to have an interactive map where you can just click on, whatever state you want and hear that performance, or even, Spotify, like just one massive Spotify album, where you have, the states like in alphabetical order or something, and you can just, go between, and so I think that in this like individuality and keeping that is my highest priority for all of the commissioners, and to be able to do something that they're all going to be very happy with, because it is just one, but it is all one piece. And so of course I like to think about so like the harmonies of the music, or like the vibrations of the music, sort of radiating out from these points at, in every state in the US, and like how that can be a positive thing. But yeah, there are a million awesome things one could do with all of those different recordings. So, and
you could do like 10 of them. You don't have to stick to just one of those million things,
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. Like you could do the Spotify album and the interactive website map and of course create an extra part for when it goes global, and there's like so many different things you could do.
That's true.
And if you're looking for a great website, you should use Squarespace.
I do use Squarespace.
Yeah, see, right?
So I'm thinking actually moving to WordPress.
No.
There's a way I can have more control.
If you know what you're doing.
Yeah, and I just built a website with them.
But this is just me wishing that Squarespace sponsored my podcast, because they sponsor everyone else's.
They do, don't they? It's a little annoying though, like Radiolab. Oh,
use the code Divergent to get 10% off your next purchase. No, I'm just
like all these people clicking Divergent. Like
yeah,
Squarespace is like, what is it with everybody trying to do this?
Yeah, no.
Eventually.
No sponsors. Yeah, eventually, right. Anyway, so you mentioned that you did an interview with Skype because of how did you send them what you were doing, or they just reach out to you?
They reached out to me, which is
how did they know?
That's one of these awesome things. I had sent out a press release about how I was teaching online with Skype and FaceTime, and that's a really cool thing too. I mean, I have students in I guess 3 countries now, but and so getting that email was pretty fun and unexpected. And I'd actually had a friend, one of my best friends, had joked about that like several months ago. She's like, "Oh, Stephanie, you should, you know that they're always looking for other ways to promote their things." And she's telling me about her friend who had, been asked to promote some other thing, and so I was happy to be able to call her up and say, "Hey, Johanna, guess what happened?" But they asked some pretty interesting questions just about using that technology
for your specific.
Yeah, exactly. For my specific usage, which it is come in handy. Mm-hmm. It has come very in handy with this whole, and that's one of the things about the 50 State Sonata Project is this is not something you could have done 15 years ago.
This is not something you could have done 10 years ago, really.
Yeah, and and so of course involving 50 people. I mean, I really still wanted to keep the individuality, the one-on-one component of commissioning a piece.
Yeah.
And so being able to have these meetings one-on-one with people, with Skype and with FaceTime has been really, really great. And the fact that that's an easily accessible or fairly easily accessible technology for a lot of people.
So what else are you working on?
What else am I working on?
Do you have time to do anything else? Do you make time to do anything?
Oh my god, making time is very important, isn't it? So I'm Cello Concerto is being premiered at the end of the spring in Boston. Mm-hmm. And I love writing orchestral music. It is my favorite thing. And what's frustrating is that writing orchestral music goes faster than writing, for example, like the violin and piano sonata. And I'm not sure sort of why that happens, but
it's probably different for someone else.
That's true. And I mean, if you look around the world or around the room, you'll see I like to draw a lot, and I used to do a lot of painting, and what's been really cool is starting to find that writing orchestral music is very similar for me to painting. Mm-hmm. And so when you think about these layers and different textures, and getting to the point in your in your work and your process where what you're imagining is like very, very close to what you can actually produce, mm-hmm. As opposed to thinking of a melody and then like not being able to write down that melody just because, intervals are still,
it doesn't work for the instrument or it just doesn't sound right.
Or that stuff. Yeah, exactly. So,
that happens so much when student composers write for trombone.
Oh, really?
It's like, people put glisses that don't work. It's like, why are you having me glissing across a partial? Like it's not going to sound like you want it to. I guarantee you. Or, I can't trill between those notes down here. Or even like older established composers, Like I'm just like,
Oh my! Can you give me an example?
no,
That's really...
I'm not gonna give you an
No,
example.
okay.
But the one came up last week,
Oh, really? Okay.
and with a composer who's been active here in New York for probably 40 years.
Okay. I was gonna say, like, are we talking about Berlioz? But no. Okay.
No.
Got it.
Well, because there's a fine line between things that great composers did to push forward what people could do on the instrument. You know, of course, there's a famous example of, you know, before Stravinsky, people just didn't write for the bassoon in the range that he starts to write a spring. It didn't happen. That's the most obvious example. And now it's commonplace, and that's actually not even the extent of the bassoon range. People write for much higher for bassoon. But then there's also just bad writing, and like you're not pushing forward the instrument. You just don't really understand what lies well for the instrument.
Right.
Anyway, I don't remember why I was getting into that, but where were we?
The difficult aspects of orchestral writing, and once you get past that, how much of a joy it is to create in that way. Yeah.
And like I don't, I have no experience. I mean, I have my experience in that direction all comes from arranging rather than like actual composing. But like the fact that, hearing that come from like a large group of people that you like came up with on your own is like, I mean, of course, a solo piece with violin, that's cool. And if I like arrange something for myself and it works and everything's great, that's cool. But it's so much cooler to arrange something for a large ensemble and then hear it and you're like, okay, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work. Yeah. But that felt really awesome.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really cool. And when I was in high school, the coolest experience for me was playing, some first violin part, especially like these Tchaikovsky finales. Mm-hmm. And as you're playing, the fourth movement, you start getting like goosebumps. And especially when it like radiates down from your crown, it's like, that is the coolest experience. And and I got totally sold on being a composer as opposed to being a violinist when I conducted a movement from a symphony that doesn't really exist now in my catalog. But when I was in high school, I had my own orchestra in high school, which was like, I was really lucky. But our orchestra conductor, Jonathan Glave, he totally let me have free reign and let me borrow the orchestra room like once or twice a week. And I asked like 40 of my friends who just happened to be, the best people at Pioneer High School in Ann Arbor. And they spent 4 hours every week running through my music. Because at that point in time, I'd been like composing like in earnest, like a crazy woman for like 2 years. And so I had a lot of music, and I conducted it, and then we performed it, and it was so awesome. Yeah. So awesome. Like nowadays, I think like that is impossible. Like getting 4 hours a week. Like, yeah.
It's the more I talk to people and the more I interview people and everything. Mm-hmm. There is luck. Yeah, sure. It was fortunate that you were able to do that and that you had friends, but also you actually like. Several people in the recent past, they're always like, oh, I was so lucky. I was like, sure. But also you made the most of those quote unquote lucky opportunities you had, because not everyone, there's a lot of people who get lucky and then just flub the opportunity because they don't have either the confidence or the drive or whatever it is necessary to take these opportunities and turn them into something that's going to be great.
Right. Yeah. No, and, what was I going to say on that point? Yeah, no, I guess I'm just going to agree. I'm just going to agree with you. I was going to say, I want to like take this moment to say, like, I actually hate it when people say good luck on something, like right before a concert or right before anything. Like, I'm just and like, I make sure to never do that as a practice. I will say best wishes with whatever you're doing, but I never want to say like good luck on it, because I feel like that implies, and maybe I'm just like really superstitious at this point, but I feel like that implies that one needs luck to go ahead and have a successful whatever. So I have totally taken that out of my vocabulary, and I try to like still smile when people tell me that, because I know it's not their fault. That's just the way people. But yeah, so hopefully maybe in 5 years I'll be like vocal enough about it that nobody will ever say
say it to you.
Good
again.
luck. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Now I'm gonna think about that every time I say it.
Yeah. But and also one of my favorite sayings is actually the difference between a delusion and a vision is execution.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's so true.
Yeah, exactly. And so, yeah, a lot more than luck involved. And, of course, when you want to be humble about something, you sort of first invoke the luck part of it. But
yeah, I mean, and there's nothing wrong with that.
The stars aligning, which is I mean, it happens.
Sure. But when I'm talking to someone, and I always make sure to point out, I was like,
that's very
okay,
nice
maybe not the luck so much, as much as you're saying it is.
Mm-hmm.
So this is I guess this would probably be. I don't want to sound like I'm trying to shoehorn something like an issue into what we're talking about, but it's kind of like it's coming to the public discussion.
Yeah,
it's in public discussion very heavily right now because the fact that we have a woman running for president.
Oh.
So there's a lot of this. There's a lot of discussion, and a lot of it comes up because of things like Twitter and Facebook and online bullying and harassment. But the music world has historically been a lot of white men doing things, and even some of the greatest, not the greatest, but some of generally the greatest are so good that even revisionist history can't get rid of them. But there are many dozens, if not hundreds of exceptional women composers whose music has been lost to history because people didn't perform it or didn't think it was good enough to be performed in public because obviously a woman's not going to write music as well as a man, with the notable exceptions being, Clara Schumann and Fanny Mendelssohn and Amy Beach and, it's gotten...
But even they had ties within their family directly into the heart of the music community.
Fanny Mendelssohn, a lot of came from the fact that they did family, like living room concerts and that they would invite people to and even Clara Schumann gave up a lot of her career because she married her husband and all of this long intro.
Yeah.
There's a lot of baggage.
As I'm cringing. Yeah.
There's well, but even in 2016 in our quote unquote enlightened time, which is a misnomer, of course, but there's a lot of baggage that comes with being first a musician who happens to be a woman, but even with as a composer.
Well, yeah, and I think that there are. I mean, maybe this is simplistic, but I can choose to have my gender be an empowering thing, or I can also choose to go into the game. I mean, it's all a game, sort of at a certain point. Going into that saying, "Oh, look at all these strikes against me," but I really enjoy being somebody who's being just a little bit different than everybody else, and I'm not because he's can sort of go into my childhood to figure out where the heck that came from. Like, why is that such a positive thing for me?
There's a lot of examples of successful musicians being oddballs as children.
Yeah. So and there you go, right? When we're putting these guys on a pedestal, yeah. And so also, I mean, for me in my own understanding and experience of things, I guess I've tried to sort of not even think of gender because at the end of the day, who's writing the best music and who is doing the most to contribute to their communities and so, I mean, that's been what I've been focused on. And I've not yet come across a situation in which I've been, actively discriminated against. And I'm assuming that is definitely not the case for a lot of women composers. But then again, I'm also very much on the young end of the composers in the new music world right now.
I would imagine it depends in a lot of ways on how old the person is that you're writing for. In some ways,
that's true. That's true as well, right?
Because that can get into dangerous territory, making a generalization like that. But
yeah, no, and so you know who my audience is, and the people I'm working with, and just what generation we're in also, because that has a lot to do with the awareness that we're brought up with. And I mean, it's like, you know, my grandmother's awareness on a lot of these issues is not going to change. You know,
right.
it's been the very same for her, you know, since her foundational years. And I try not to hold that against her. And I do know that this issue will be getting better and better and better as these things equal out. And, you know, and as we realize that gender's not actually the thing that is distinguishing how well you can do something. And but for now, I mean, hey, there are all these, you know, women composer only, you know, calls for scores that I can participate in, and so there's actually a heck of a lot that I can take advantage of if I wanted to. And so for me, I sort of enjoy being in the, I don't know. For right now, it's unique, and for me, it's okay. But I do know that it is a problem.
I mean, it is a problem, but part of the cool thing is that, you know, within the community that you like you said, you're pretty much a baby when it comes to down
but I'm also like actively establishing my own projects without having to be dependent whatsoever on any other, you know, foundation or any other organizer.
Oh, but let me clarify a little bit. When you use the term baby, I am referring only to your age, not to your ability. Like,
no, of course, I'm 25. Like,
right, exactly. But in addition to that, maybe you have the opportunity to be on like, the forefront and the cutting edge, if you will, of the next great generation of women composers. You know,
or of composers in general.
That's
and I think
what I meant.
No, and I'm hoping that we will be able to get to the point where we, you know, stop having to distinguish,
right?
Because, you know, there's that as a vehicle to raise awareness, but then there's that just separates us all that much more. But I do totally intend on, you know, constructing a new model for people to be composers, you know, and especially women. And I do hope that I'll end up being a role model for people in the future. And, you know, I don't know what that means in terms of like even being, you know, being able to have children or to do these, you know, to have this, you know, these family things. And a lot of, I think I know 2 female composers who have children out of all the female composers I know. And so that is sort of something that I was really upset about in undergrad. When I saw that and saw that was sort of like the conventional model of being a composer and also, you know, being female as well. And I've always wanted to have a family, you know, eventually. That's always been a big thing for me. So, I do intend to figure out a way to sort of integrate the two. And I mean, even just by...
Well, it doesn't have to be a case of having your cake and eating it too. Like they don't have to be like mutually exclusive.
Right. That's true. And so far the model has been that they're mutually exclusive.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to change that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure how I'll do it yet, but
you can't know for sure until you get to that point. You know, you can make all the like, well, I'll do this, this, and this, but you know, when situations arise, you have to handle them as they come. I would imagine.
Right.
Since that's not necessarily a thing that I personally will ever face, I can't really speak to that. You know. Completely knowledgeably. Just to put that out there, don't hate me. I acknowledge my shortcomings.
Yeah. No, but I there's a lot of really powerful voices out there right now, reinforcing the fact that gender is not something we really need to take into account, and that there are a lot of people writing very good music. And I think that also as we get better and better at being interconnected, for better or for worse too, because it's like, if Facebook is still around in 40 years when a bunch of us start like dying, like imagine that, like right now, you get the joy of seeing your friend when they get, a new puppy, and you get to like, love all up on the puppy pictures. But what happens when, there's a new person dying every day and you're experiencing that loss with them, because by then you have like, 2,000 friends. Like, that's, I think that's one of the difficult parts that we're going to have to face with this whole, interconnectivity. But,
to be honest, I feel like that anytime someone I know gets married, I'm like, oh, you're dead.
That's terrible.
That is terrible.
That's really terrible. Okay.
I'm kidding.
Dan Dunford's Shortcomings, the Dan Dunford Shortcomings podcast.
You have to understand, though, that my background is like a very conservative Christian thing. And I actually started my undergrad at a Christian college. Uh-huh. So every single person I started school with in 2007, because I had to transfer.
They're currently experiencing marital bliss?
Well, it was more like they were 21 and 22. They were all graduated, getting jobs, and having babies. Uh-huh. And I was not even done with my degree, and I was just like, brr.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm going to probably cut all that, but anyway.
We're out of tea, that's why.
Yeah, probably.
Those are big glasses too. Big cups.
They're really good. That was really good. I think honestly, I think it's just I have like a very sardonic view. Like I don't even necessarily believe a lot of the sardonic things I say, but it's kind of like I kind of enjoy being like the grumpy old man.
Oh really? Yeah. Well, the hair and the beard help you out there, don't they?
Most people. I always tell people I'm a 55-year-old man on the inside.
Really?
So I'm like, just let me go to bed and watch my Law and Order reruns.
Hey, Law and Order is really, really good. Yeah.
I've been mostly watching X-Files recently, but.
Oh really? Yeah. Is it actually that?
I love X-Files.
Really?
But I'm kind of a science fiction nerd.
But doesn't the science not really work out? Like,
it's about aliens.
But isn't that frustrating?
No. I
would imagine that'd be terribly frustrating.
I have a T-shirt that says "I want to believe." I want to believe that this isn't just it. Like
my grandfather saw UFOs.
Yeah, see,
no, like totally. No, I know. He was working for Boeing.
Yeah, like there's. I mean, let's just say photography wasn't quite as advanced back when a lot of the major UFO sightings happened, but like there's.
This is you rationalizing.
This is me rationalizing, but also like. Isn't it incredibly arrogant?
Yes.
As humans or as musicians, as anything, to assume that we are the only things that have ever existed.
Yeah, yeah.
Like the only humanoid-esque life forms that have ever existed. That's like that with how big the universe is and how it changes, is changing constantly, expanding, contracting. Things are exploding and being created every day.
Right.
Like. There's how what is the chance that this is the only time it happened was on this one planet in this fairly tiny solar system in this medium-sized galaxy?
No, which is why with advances in artificial intelligence, we'll be able to go and send out probes to actually figure out what else is out there and to go ahead and populate it with all things bright and beautiful.
Yeah. See, I like. My
Your pessimistic self is about to rear its head.
No,
okay.
Absolutely not. This is like where I'm like, yeah. Anyway, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, so like this whole concept of traveling in time and space and going and visiting other civilizations is a huge thing that I really love.
Oh yeah, me too. Like every Philip K. Dick novel, I know.
I just finished reading The Man in the High Castle.
Oh really? Okay, that one I don't know.
Well, I mean, they made an
Ubik is my favorite.
Which one?
Ubik.
I haven't read that one.
Yeah.
I've read most of the standards, do androids stream electric sheep and the one mostly
the ones that have been made into films.
The ones that have been made into films, even if I don't necessarily like the films. Like Man in the High Castle just made it. I love Minority Report, but
I can't stand the eyes bit. The eyes bit.
It's grody.
And I started thinking it's really grody. Yeah.
But I mean, like...
No, it is the absolute coolest.
Yeah, and Phil K. Dick, he's still probably the best at, like, subverting your expectations.
True,
like being like, The Man in the High Castle is set in 1962 America,
mm-hmm.
but if Germany and Japan had won World War II and split the U.S., so there's, like, the Pacific States belong to Japan, there's the Rocky Mountains, which is neutral zone, and the rest of it, like, from the Rockies east all belongs to Germany.
What the next book I'm reading is.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it's so weird. Like, I was reading it, like, I'm just, like, sitting on the train reading it on my iPad, and I'm getting these, like, weird, like, oh, what if that happened? Anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, to kind of, like, circle back around to the music idea, like, I know we have kind of gone way off the beaten path, but the path that I kind of had in mind, but, like, there's no way we're the only ones creating music, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Like,
that's a very cool thought,
isn't it though?
Yeah. Well, no, and this is sort of odd, and this is where my one of my best friends again. She's like, yeah, at this point, I would be going to the neurologist, but but in terms of, like, the coolest things are happening with how my brain is processing sound now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what's sort of happened between now and, like, even a year from now, but being able to hear all these harmonies in, like, drones or in taxi horn, car horns, maybe it's just moving to New York and being around all of these.
No, it's constant noise.
No, but, like,
constant rhythms.
No, yeah. But like, and even in my laundry room, there's a really low B flat and a higher B flat, and so I end up, sort of making some melody in between them whenever I'm working on my laundry, and just to be able, I mean, I feel like, I mean, not like sort of the Matrix or whatever, but I feel like I'm getting to hear this whole other world that's happening,
mm-hmm.
and being able to appreciate it. And sometimes that, freaks out my friends a little bit when I'm like, oh my goodness, did you just hear that beautiful, perfect fourth between, these two things, and they're probably hearing that sound as just, icky noise. But it's really, yeah, I don't know. It's really, really cool.
It's really easy to tumble down, like, a rabbit hole of like strange, once you get started on that path of, like,
mm-hmm.
like, thinking in a way beyond what we currently perceive and understand as our physical world.
Yeah.
Like, you can lose yourself pretty quickly if you go down that.
Yeah.
And, but sometimes it can be a really great thing as an artist, as a person,
completely.
No,
I think it also, like, gives a certain validity to the work that I'm doing too. And this is maybe another, like, tiny tangent, but my the grandmother with maybe the out of date political views, she literally...
Don't take away her guns.
No,
just don't do it. She wants them. She wants them.
No, she... Oh, my goodness. She grew up during the Dust Bowl, the youngest of 6, with her parents were just, elementary school teachers. And she jumped up at the piano. I don't know even how they had a piano, but she jumped up on the piano and started playing harmonies with both hands when she was, like, 3.
Mm-hmm.
And she is very stubborn. She faked her way through music school on her ear. I mean, she's not listened to the radio in decades because her brain inputs harmonies over what she's hearing, and that's how she can. I mean, I grew up listening to her compositions,
mm-hmm.
and I guess that's another thing why the whole female composer thing, that's never really bothered me, because when I grew up, the composer I had frequent access to was my grandmother,
mm-hmm.
and that just was just really cool, and
yeah.
it's like badass, whatever. No, I mean, it really is, right? When
yeah.
you play a melody for her and then she's all of a sudden doing, and I think it was like halfway through undergrad, I came home and, visiting her during the holidays, and I started just to talk about, very, very elementary musical theory concepts, and she had absolutely no idea about any of them. But yet, I was also able to fully understand the complexity of harmonies that she was using in her music when she would, play. And in high school, I started having musical hallucinations. So,
You mean like a kinesthesia kind of thing, or
No, like where. Well, one really funny one was I was listening to Mahler and I turned it off.
That's the wrong word. Yes.
No, yeah, no, but we'll get there because I'll slip around back there. And I remember, I was in my basement. It was the summer. I was listening to Mahler, and I turned it off and was doing something else. And then I realized I was still hearing the Mahler, and but this was a piece that I didn't know well. So my brain, there was no way that I would have been able to keep on, going. And I was like, okay, well, that's odd. And I took off my headphones and it was still going. I was like, oh my God, wait, this is crazy and funny. But, and then it would increasingly happen right before I'd fall asleep, where I would hear an orchestra playing orchestral music that was happening in real time, but I felt like, I was just a person in the audience, hearing it. I didn't feel like I was really part of the creation of it. But I could zoom in, to the basses or to the trombones and hear their melodies, just a little bit louder than everybody else. And that was a really, really cool thing. And so by the end of high school, I was, getting myself to go to sleep by getting myself to imagine, big band jazz music. And I actually was involved in a pain study at University of Michigan, and I got put into an MRI, and I was like, you know what, wouldn't it be cool to see if I can make this musical hallucination thing happen? And but when I got into the MRI, it was this very loud machine, and exactly, and I left like a little chagrined, like, I did not produce what I thought I might be able to produce, but sure enough, I got a phone call the next day from the lead doctor being like, you need to get back in here. We found something on your scan. And they thought that I had an arachnoid cyst. And on Wikipedia, sure enough, of, the short list of symptoms, it is hereditary. And one of the symptoms is musical hallucinations. So and they did a second MRI with, contrast so that they could see sort of what was happening a little bit better. And it turns out I just have an abnormally shaped fold in that region. And so literally that printout is framed right under my degrees and almost means more to me than my degrees.
Probably cost less.
Well, yeah, I was paid. No, actually that second MRI, I did have to pay for that one. But I got myself in trouble there. But literally my parents
elective MRIs.
So there you go. So there's sort of like an alternate explanation for that. But I did figure out about a year ago that I do have synesthesia. Concrete color.
I knew. Like I said, kinesthesia. I was like, that just doesn't sound right.
No, I wish. No, yeah. I only have it with like. And I realized this actually when I was in my lesson, and I could not explain my music to my teacher without invoking colors. And I was like, okay, this is a little wrong. And I tried to figure out, okay, well, can I think of this particular section with any other color besides this deep blue of like the darker clarinets? Like, no, and I couldn't do that. But then that sort of goes back to, I originally wanted to be a visual artist. Throughout my entire childhood, I was obsessed. And the only time I ever got yelled at by a teacher, in like fourth grade, was Mr. Matthews saying, Stephanie, stop drawing. I'm talking, I'm having a discussion with the class. So,
and then now you're at a point where you've made money doing both.
That is true. And for a while, my art brought in a lot more money than my music. Yeah. And so, no, I only have color number and color letter associations, like concrete. I wish that I had what Messiaen had. I wish that I had perfect pitch. But I don't.
I like the kind of thing you're describing. Like it makes me think about. This is kind of like it might be an obvious thing to make a connection with. But the things that you're saying makes me think more of like the way Van Gogh painted. Like in the swirling colors, because a lot of his paintings seem to me constructed much more like music.
That's an interesting thought.
Because like it's so, everything is so interwoven and indistinct but undeniably beautiful and perfect in its way. Even when he's doing a portrait, like the famous portrait of him wearing the straw hat, like yes, that's like a concrete image of himself. but also like it's hazy and indistinct, and that kind of thing.
Right, and so it's almost like as if these small personality quirks in our work that often we try to weed out in order to sort of fit in better, during undergrad. No, these are actually the things that you need to hold on to.
But also
and expand
you have
on.
to be careful, because the things that made Van Gogh a great artist also made him cut off his ear and kill himself. That combination of madness and dysfunction within one's brain and artistic genius can push you, and it's something that you don't want to manage, but you have to manage on some level, or else it'll drive you mad, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and again, like, accepting the fact, and regardless of whether this is true or not, placebo effect is still an effect. So if you go ahead and sort of construct things in the way that will help you get the best outcome, I think sometimes you can rationalize that and be okay.
Yeah.
But like I was in this pain study in high school because I have endometriosis, and it's not as bad, but it's basically like interior bleeding, and it's not very
great.
fun.
That sounds great.
And no, it's really painful. It's really painful. And, and of course I got put on a whole bunch of, medications in high school that didn't actually work. But getting used to being like in agony on a consistent basis, and like going through that, and of course going through that, it helped me to be like, oh, well, all of these composers also had their own vices, and maybe I should sort of wholly embrace this vice. And it was difficult, and
you're saying vices, but I think you mean like demons more
or
than
something. Yeah, because
you didn't choose to have things happening to you.
That's true. That's true. But this huge thing that you have to stare in the face, and you either figure out some way to work with it, or yes, it completely bowls you over. And I did end up missing a lot of class in undergrad because I was stuck at home, just in horrible amounts of pain. But nowadays, if I'm in a rehearsal and something goes wrong, it's definitely not going to be as bad as being rolling on the floor in pain. So it's like, okay, well, we can work through this. Yeah, we can figure this out. And so, I think that, taking this, the cards that you are dealt and becoming intimately familiar with every single aspect of those cards, good or bad, and figuring out how to leverage the bad things in order to find something that's good about that. I think it's made me a more effective leader in these, in projects, and and I hope that I'll be, that any other, things that come up, I hope that I'll be able to deal with them in a similar manner.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So the 50 State Sonata Project, that is going to be premiered in what rough time period? So
technically, well, so there are a lot of concerts scheduled in April.
Okay.
The first concert has already happened in Alabama, at University of Alabama, and the next one is at the end of February in Colorado, University of Northern Colorado, and then the ball really starts rolling, and then the rest happen throughout the spring. And there's there are going to be several throughout the summer at summer festivals, and then early in the autumn.
So this is going to be continuing throughout the year.
Yeah.
And then you will start on the next one, and
yeah,
while you're doing all your other stuff as well.
That's true.
So where can people find you?
Where can people find me? Well, apparently Google likes me enough that if you put in Stephanie and composer, I'm the first two hits.
Ooh,
right?
Nice.
Yeah. But you can find me at stephanieannboyd.com.
No E on Anne.
Yeah, no E on Anne. No. And actually, I was always upset growing up because my grandmother's middle name is Anne, my sister's, my aunt's, my mother's, and my cousin's. Everybody has a middle name of Anne, and I really hated it. But turns out there's this Mormon composer named Stephanie Boyd who's in her 30s, and so she got all the URLs right before I did. And so I was like, oh, darn it, I have to just come to terms with my middle name, and so now I use it.
Do you still hate it?
No, I don't. But I like a week before John Luther Adams won his Pulitzer, I Facebooked him and I said, "Hey, just so you know, somebody called me, you know, or said that I have something sort of like John Luther Adams," and he's like, "You know what? I really didn't like my middle name either. I really hated it, but now I wouldn't trade it for anything." And I sort of feel the same way. And so,
well, it came straight from JLA himself, so
yeah, must be good. So and Instagram, Twitter,
Facebook, all of the above,
even Snapchat. But
I still don't know how Snapchat works.
Yeah, you keep it that way. You keep it that way
to deal with it.
Yeah.
It just seems dumb to me. Anyway, Stephanie, thank you for this. This is great.
Thank you, Dan. It's been a pleasure.